this blending coming into the IT world, for me at least, retiring 3 years ago, it's brand new to me, but I see so many visionaries here looking forward and wondering, okay, how do we blend these things together? The difficulty is dragging those knuckle draggers over to this side to see the value of IT, to see the value of blending the electronic age into what we do in direct action. We didn't have the opportunity to really capitalize on those things, but I think now is a good time to, Mac brought up the silos. That's why IRI was created, was to break down these silos between the private, the public, and the academic world. So our threat landscape here in San Diego is a little bit different from the rest of the world. San Diego has always been really laid back. They seem to manage their issues quite well as far as the past. So we'll see moving forward. Threat landscape is always changing. I think those asymmetrical threats that we have to look at, we've always been looking at, but now we have an opportunity to leverage the capital coming from the IT world and the cyber world.
I like it. Leveraging that is really important. Mac, you know, back in the day, the word cyber would appear, you know, worrying for the physical specialist, because the physical specialist would say, oh, well, that's not me. But now it's more a case of who you're going to call, isn't it? I don't know. How can we blend these two sides of the house in terms of a service? Is it literally about knowing who to pick up the phone, just as you hire a TSCM service, so you're going to work with a cyber professional? I don't know. Is that too simplistic?
Well, I think it begins with a willingness, right? There has to be a willingness from all sides to open their minds, set the egos aside, and be willing to get into the discussion of how we do this together. I apologize. For how we do this together. So, yes, like TSCM, but cyber is an ongoing threat, right? So I can bring in a TSCM team and they can sweep the conference room or the building or the suite or whatever it is and say we're good. But a cyber attack, accessing maybe my emails with the client's schedules, right, or the tail number or anything else, that's vulnerable all the time, right? That can't be, oh, we did a little cyber check and you're okay, right? It's like we have our intel guys in the background, geofencing and scanning the web and scanning the dark web and all the providers like WorldAware, like DataMiner, feeding us intel, right? You need your cyber team working cohesively with you, right? It's kind of having, if we were talking tactically, like you have a breacher. You don't call one in when you get to the front door and you go, oh, we need to get in here. We better call up a breacher, right? There's one in the squad. And cyber today has become that, and vice versa, because so many of the hacks are physical, right? So those two have to get their act together.
I think so, and I think especially this is an interesting format, right? Because we've got cyber professionals and channel professionals and corporate security professionals all in the same conference. So there's going to be people out there saying, actually, from an organizational standpoint, I'm going to offer both services. You know, if I'm a police force, I'm going to link it. If I'm a private individual, I'm going to offer two sides of the house. At least that's the thinking behind some of the things we read in the news. Derek, what's it like for you in the public sector? Has the convergence piece happened?
Yes. Yeah, well, first of all, yes, it's trying to happen. I expect it to evolve even further. I appreciate those comments with you from the other panelists, particularly with the knuckle dragger comments, and because I understand there is a differentiation between in this. And many of you already know this, so I'll just go ahead and repeat what we already know. In our industry, there's there's the operator, the tactical operator that brings a wealth of tactical conflict war zone experience, and then there's the more brainy management oriented type of person, and within every organization I've been to that's been affiliated with security, there's always been that little mesh or mesh or inability to mesh between those two elements. And I think now what we're seeing is a third category of person in the security industry that's cerebral, analytical, very savvy with technology, social media, hacking, cyber crimes, etc. And so it's interesting to see the dynamic of the evolution of the security professional, because it's not just the knuckle draggers anymore that come in a room and have a presence. And it's not just the manager that's good with numbers, good with emails, good with contracts, but there's also this other breed of cybersecurity professional that I think is going to see a greater potential going forward. And so, but in regards to your question about public and social order, I think, I have a good friend who was formerly with the London Met, and he was on the public disorder unit. And he talked to me about how they're using the cameras and technologies to pick out the key people in the protests so that they could, wedge in and extract key people, key troublemakers in these protests. I see that happening. I see more and more as, this issue with defunding the police and the public disorder becomes more of a thing in the United States. I do see that technology becoming more evolved here in the United States. And it's kind of a way forward that we have no choice but to head in that direction.
And I'm pleased you picked up the surveillance and the alarm system type aspects of all of this, because there's a lot of managed service providers out there who, especially this pandemic, they thought, oh no, I don't have any revenue, so what am I going to do? They're trying to go into that CCTV, surveillance, man guarding, in the private sector at least, where before they would just leave it alone. They'd say, oh no, that's a preserve of the physical world. So maybe there's a business case, both if you're a state organization or a private organization. I'll tell you what then, Jerry, one thing that I think both sides of the house can find common ground on is information filtering and intelligence. A lot of people are trying to sell a lot of sparkly boxes that will tell you everything. I suppose if you travel to Egypt, you really don't need a big briefing on the pyramids. You need something a bit more about your particular street and what's going on in that thing. Where do you see the balance between the security professionals still manually analyzing the intel that they get and all of this fantastic AI, sparkly box giving them the answer? Where does that lie?
I'll use a quote from President Reagan back in the 80s. It was trust but verify. Aggregating all this information and turning it into actionable intelligence is super important. I mean, that's the intelligence cycle, right? We take information in and then we process it, turn it into actionable intelligence. That's part of the problem that we have, is that we get so much of a data dump and one side's not talking to the other. So as a professional that's actually working out in the field, I want to make sure that I'm looking at the information that's coming in so that I can see if there's any dots out there that haven't been connected. It's always going to be important for us to maintain somebody on our team, even if we utilize intelligence as a service, where we're subcontracting it out and bringing it back in. You always need somebody within that team. It goes back to what we've been talking about, is making sure that your people are multidimensional, where you can utilize them in different spaces so that you have all those boxes ticked so that you can make sure that the information is correct. One of the things that we do at IRI is we try and link people up together. So if we have a public agency that's out there and we know of a private entity that's out there also, we can somehow get those two together. We're a nonprofit think tank. So what we do is we aggregate information. We try to push it out to different ends. Working as a nonprofit, we don't have any dog in the fight. We don't have to worry about anything else. We just push information out. We connect people together.
And perhaps that's the differentiating factor. Mac, just putting information together or getting people together, is that really where we need intelligence as a service to go? Because that would speak to both the people who see themselves as purely cyber and purely physical. I know you've got strong opinions on things that would alarm you from afar when you discover actually it's not a big deal. Where does that balance lie, manual and automatic filtering?
I think it's a super hard balance to find from my experience on both sides of the fence. I guess what we need is targeted intelligence. But how is the Intel side of the house going to know what I need if I don't explain it to them, right? So if I'm going to work in Lagos or in Davos for the WEF or in Bangladesh with this or that assignment as doing EP, if I can't have that conversation with the Intel guys and say, look, this is what's useful to me. This is what I need to know. These are the filters that I need in place, right? And we can't have that conversation. I always say that the Intel teams, it's super useful if someone on that Intel team is an ex-boots on the ground agent, right? Because he can kind of go, yeah, you know what, they really don't need to know that right now. And then you have the dissonance between that, as a previous speaker was saying, that Intel dump, which is like this sensory overload of information, and what we call microintelligence, right? I've often given the example in previous that, you know, we get from Intel, hey, there's a demonstration on this corner, and you go down there and you find two Kazakhstani ladies with a megaphone, and it's not really a demonstration. But all the drivers have started rerouting to secondary routes and tertiary routes and panicking because there's supposedly a demonstration, but it isn't. But the guy sitting halfway across the world just knows what the Intel feed is telling him. So that conversation is so important because more and more we just, you know, your phone's blowing up with Intel feeds, right, with flags, and it's kind of hard to do your job because you're so busy staring at your screen, 99% of which is not actually all that useful, and I really don't need to know it now. You can send me that in the day end brief, but I don't need to know it in the middle of an assignment with boots on the ground while I'm trying to pay attention to the principal. So those conversations need to happen.
Well, perhaps that's a strong message to security leadership of any organization. Somebody has sold them a solution that maybe is basically based on compliance or covering themselves. Please buy my wonderful solution. I'll tell you every alert that ever could happen for anything, and then you can never say to me, I didn't tell you. But of course, that's covering themselves. That's not providing actionable intelligence. So perhaps the managed security service of the future needs such a boots on the ground person to rationalize it per customer. That will be interesting. Now, of course, in the State Department, you may have greater resources than a small company. Is that more possible, Derek?
Yes. Yes, it's, I will say yes and no. Okay, because due to the bureaucracy of the organization, we tend to hire people based on their backgrounds from the get-go. So to put in a cybersecurity database professional, he's hired for that reason, and he may not have any background as the boots on the ground operator will bring to the table. So I guess I would say the challenge is you want to hire the best. Okay, so you want to hire the people with the right backgrounds, but it's very hard to find that boots on the ground operator that also knows cyber techie stuff. And it's hard to find that techie guy who can really understand what the boots on the ground operator needs and wants and the verbiage that they speak. Now, it is possible. I have seen it. I've seen some great examples. Some of my Navy SEAL friends, some of my SF buddies, some of the guys within my organization now, they were able to successfully pass in and out of both spheres. But I do think that creating more of that evolved type of security professional will be a challenge going forward in the future.
Definitely, no, I very much agree. But I hope you all see why this is a topic that I want to bring to the MSS debate too, because surely in this world, what do you think, Jerry? Do you see this topic becoming more integrated in the MSS of the future topic, or have we reached as far as we can go with it? Because I'm happy to do more panels such as this, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Thank you, Phelim. I think this is a really important topic to have. It's important to bring people into this so that they could start to understand, especially from the other side, from the operator side, where they don't know what they're missing out as far as sitting in a GSOC somewhere and providing that information. It could be a person that's tasked out to give information back to their team. We utilize this with liaisons, going over to the other team, to the other side, the intel side, or to the actual operating team, so that we have liaisons going back and forth. I think there's a position in GSOC for somebody like that, and I think it's worthy of a discussion, more so for the education of the people that are coming in here to listen, to people like Eric, to people like Derek, to sit down and understand what you guys meaning in the cyber community, can bring to the table. I think we're missing out in a great resource from you guys. And having been with MSSP for the past 3 years with Phelim, I find it incredible in the amount of information that is here that's really not being pushed out. You guys do a great job with what you have, and I think we could utilize that as a resource and push it out to the rest of the world that doesn't realize what kind of a resource we have here.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you to the IRI for being such a great institute and help. And I like that you mentioned the SOC. Maybe then, because Derek's got a presentation next, maybe if I ask you, Mac, this SOC of the future, maybe that's a term that will prick up the ears of all the cyber specialists, because cyber specialists have one particular idea of what a SOC might look like, but a converged SOC or a SOC of the future, what's it going to look like, Mac?
Well, it's not of the future. There are companies doing it. The corporations doing it, what we call fusion centers, right? So even getting away from that language of SOC, GSOC, whatever it is, it's basically having the three major disciplines sitting in a room together. That you've got your physical, your cyber, and your intel guys actually sharing a space. And that way, firstly, you're aware of what each other can do. I was training a protection force for a very large convention center. And many of them have been working there for quite some years. And I said to the security manager, hey, tomorrow morning, can we start like in your GSOC with the whole team? I'd like to bring them in there. And I discovered that 80% of them who had been working at the facility had never set foot in the GSOC. They had no idea what it looked like, what the capabilities were, what the CCTV coverage looked like, the ability of the cameras to zoom in, to take screenshots, to the camera analytics, and all the resources that were at their disposal. They're just standing out at the post doing their thing. And they were like, wow, we have all this like behind us. I'm like, yes, you do, right? And that was kind of an eye-opener for me, that it's so siloed that we don't even know what the people on our own team are doing, right? But if we're sitting together, if I'm there planning a trip, an international trip, and the intel guy flags something, he can just say to me, hey, Matt, come look at this. You see this group is discussing this protest, you know, do you think that might actually have something to do with your trip? And I can go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Can you dig a little bit more on that, right? As opposed to maybe he sends me an email, maybe he thinks it's not worth looking at. And if he sends me an email, maybe I read it and maybe I pay attention. But that way we can all discuss. And as the intel stuff changes, I can say to the cyber guy, hey, look, we really got to be careful of this, right? Or we're really going to need support with that because, you know, the threat landscape is ever shifting. So yes, we need to sit together. This business of cyber on the 14th floor and physical in the basement, right? And the intel guy, you know, working from his living room, that's got to stop. That's really got to stop. We got to sit down together. We got to understand it's not a competition. We're all there. We can learn from each other, and we need to learn from each other in order to provide effective protection.
I like it. Great sentiments. And just a little anecdote from me. When I started these events, if I invited a physical specialist to a cyber event, they'd be fine. I'd be talking about corporate security, travel security, and I mentioned the word information, and they didn't want to know. And the same thing happened the other way around. Cyber specialists were hot on all the topics, MDR, and then I mentioned physical. They said, no, I don't like it. So hopefully we're making a bit of progress and people are being more receptive. We are a little bit out of time and we do need to move on to Derek's presentation, but this has been a fantastic and very interesting panel. Jerry, Mac, and Derek, thank you very much. Let's give them a wonderful virtual round of applause. Someone's managed that. Very good, very good. I've got to do it myself. Leanne's clapping. I found the clapping thing too. Mike's also clapping. Eric's also clapping. That's really good. Rachel snapping again. It's not clapping from Rachel. That's really good. All right. I will see you, Jerry, and you, Mike, in the audience, and I will just leave us with Derek.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm grateful for the invitation. I'm humbled that you guys would be interested in what I have to say. As I look through on the website, as I look through the backgrounds of all the attendees, I will tell you that I am an esteemed company, and each of you have established yourself and are accomplished in the security field. And let's just say I'm really happy to be here. Okay, so I was asked to speak a little bit about some of my lessons learned throughout my career. I've been with the Diplomatic Security Service for 19 years. Prior to this, I was a police officer. Prior to this, I was a military officer. And you can see my bio on the website for more details. But there are three distinct comments I'd like to make about my career that I think in which I've learned, or the three capstone lessons that I'd like to share. And I come from a tactical background between military and my police background. I tend to be a little bit informal. So if we were sitting around in a pub over a pint of beer or something, and along the 3 points off the good in any business or any line of work that you're in. Second point is to let's see. Pick up the key qualities in the people around you in order to evolve. That's my second point. My third point, I want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between management and leadership, because those are two different things. My first point, surrounding yourself with good people. I mean, that's pretty obvious. We go through a vetting process, we go through security clearances in order to find the right people that meet a certain criteria to be part of our organization. And when we establish this vetting standard and acquire the right people, we trust them with access to certain things. It's very much, any government works the same way, any security organization is the same way. And now I'm starting to realize that you in the private world, corporate security, industrial espionage, all of these are following the same and seed. Probably one of the most important things I've learned in DSS is having these people and also trusting them and relying upon them to represent you. I don't know if it's a government service thing. I haven't been in the private sector enough to be able to comment on it, but I do believe there's issues with micromanagement. Micromanagement being when people are managing too much. There's also the opposite of when you're not there enough and you don't give your people enough guidance. So one of the important things I've learned along with this concept of finding the right people is knowing what it is that you need to speak to them about, how you need to present this directive, your guidance, and just talking to them in the right way. And they read you when you're stressed. If you don't really trust them and you're telling them that you trust them, they know when you're being not authentic. I believe this is something that can be picked up, much like animals. Animals know how you feel. They know when you're scared. They know when you're happy. They know when you're sad. We as humans have developed, I believe, that same sixth sense. You can, for those of you that have read Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But I don't think you need to read the book to understand what I mean here. We know good leaders. We know good managers. And we also know poor leaders and poor managers. And unfortunately, we will all have a little bit of both throughout our time here. But the concept of relying on your people and communicating the end state, not telling them how to get there, but communicating what it is that you want at the very end of the process, and giving them the freedom to apply their own creativity, their own knowledge, their own backgrounds, and their own skills to deliver that win for you and the team. That's what I believe is invaluable in terms of what I've learned. My first point of what I've learned. The second thing, during the panel, we talked a little bit about, the three silos and the three types of security professional. Okay, to revisit that, there's the knuckle dragger operator who comes from a strong background, tactical background. Then there's the person that perhaps doesn't have any police or military background, perhaps joined a security organization right after college, and he or she is very good at office, the administrative side, emails, office politics, staying ahead of things before they become a problem. So that's the second, the managerial security professional. That's the second type. And then the third type, as I mentioned, was the cybersecurity techie professional. In my career, I've noticed that the ability to understand what each of those people do, communicate, and really be able to understand what each of them are saying, but also to translate that to the rest of your team is imperative. It's imperative. And just so not only being or recognizing which of those three categories you are in, but also to be able to fit in each of those at the right time is imperative. So for example, in my case, I started off in Islamabad, Pakistan at the U.S. Embassy there. Okay, while I was there, I was what we call the agent in charge of the ambassador's protective detail. So for my whole tour there, I was in Islam. This is right after 9/11, mind you. So things were still a little kinetic in terms of the United States government presence in Pakistan, and things were still very busy. Okay, so protecting the U.S. ambassador right after 9/11 in Pakistan ended up being a very interesting and fulfilling experience for me. But there again, I was operating. I had to be. I was driven by a schedule, and my background was very important towards being a success in that role. Now, fast forward that 10, 15 years, and now I'm the Deputy Regional Security Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Abuja, Nigeria. Well, in Abuja, Nigeria, this is a huge embassy. It's a corporate embassy, if you will. Therefore, our program was much bigger and much robust because it's one of the biggest African nations. So I learned very quickly the importance of executive decision-making. I became that managerial cybersecurity professional. But while I was there, also, I got more exposure to our security technical specialists and our security engineering officers. These are the people that handle the physical security of, such as the cameras, the bulletproof windows, the gates, the fencing around the embassy, the doors that are magged and unmagged in order to gain access to the different buildings. So that exposure at that higher level and understanding each of those siloed specialties was very important, I believe, to my success. But I will take it one step further. Even outside of the security field, now in the U.S. Embassy, there's a security attaché, which I was. This is at any embassy. For those of you that have foreign affairs experience. And then at any embassy, there's a security attaché. There's also a military attaché, there's a political attaché, and there's an economic attaché. And each of these people have we call them cones in the U.S. State Department, but each of these people, they have their own, they're writing reports and they're passing information to D.C. based along their specialties. So my ability to step out of the security officer specific role and speak to the political officer on the foreign policy regarding Nigeria's humanitarian assistance, or the economic officer, my ability to speak to him about dealing with the corruption within the Nigerian government, or helping them with the economy, the inflation, or the availability of products to all classes of the Nigerian citizens. These are all pieces of American foreign policy and what they want to promote. So when each of these guys came to me, they understood that I had a deeper understanding of what they were doing. I'm not just a thug knuckle dragger that's carrying a gun in a third world country, but I'm somebody that was articulate, I was intellectual, I was able to analyze the problems and make recommendations to them, and on joint projects, come to a consensus and a workable solution. That was probably one of the most valuable lessons I learned, particularly not only in that assignment, but going forward in my career within DS. If I decide to stay with DS, I'm eligible to retire soon. But if I do stay with DS, I do see to shed the reputation to do that. And I talked with different private security professionals throughout the course of being at different embassies. I imagine that ability to blend in and not just be siloed or boxed in to the security field, I believe that will also be something that will most likely carry over into the private world someday for me. Okay, so my third and final point is this difference between management and leadership. This is a big topic. If you read my bio, you understand that I'm a West Point graduate, and while at West Point, I was a leadership studies major. The topic of management versus leadership is, that's a question that I've dealt with throughout my career. And if you were to ask me what the difference is now, I will tell you that management is what you need to keep your job and to keep the blocks checked. Okay, much of security, it's a blame game. It's like I told you so, kind of a thing, and that's kind of a side that I don't really like too much about my job, because it's more than that. It should be about leadership. It should be about having people understand the importance of not shopping in a certain part of the capital because there's crime issues. It's not a matter of saying, well, let me just give you an example. In Pakistan, in Islamabad was one of my favorite assignments, okay? But I noticed that it was my first assignment, and I learned very quickly about the blame game, so to speak, when it comes to security. And I hate to say that, but I just listen to my story and I'll explain a little bit more. There's a certain part of town of the capital. It was near the Red Mosque, and the Red Mosque was famous for having every Friday, which is the Muslim Sabbath day, they'd have fiery speeches, fiery gatherings, and it was known for having clerics that were anti-Western, anti-US specifically. So there's some shops, and there are certain things you could buy in that part of town where the American diplomats wanted to go, but they could not. Well, what we found was that there are some people that had lived in Islamabad, some diplomats at the embassy that had lived in Islamabad prior to 9/11, prior to things being a lot more difficult on Americans there, and they could shop there freely because the conditions were different. Well, it was an important lesson for me as a young security officer there that you need to tell these people about what these off-limits areas, and you need to get proof that you told them that, because they're inevitably, they will. If it's not that, they're going to do something else that they shouldn't be doing. And this kind of falls along the line of, I think, travel security. But they're going to do that, and you need proof that you told them that. And so we needed to like do a security brief, and when people came in, we had to give them this form for them to sign to show that they had done that or had received the briefing. But were it not for that, they were going to say, well, I didn't know that we weren't supposed to do that. And it devolves very quickly, and it impedes the overall mission and cooperation and really the harmony of the embassy in order to go forward. So this is what I mean by managed security. And every post I've been to since Islamabad, there's this game that we have to play with the diplomat. So if I want to be the sheepdog in charge of the sheep, I've got to prove to the sheep that I told them so they can't say that the sheepdog never told them. There's a side of security that I don't like so much. I understand it's necessarily evil. Now let's move on to leadership. Leadership in security is about inspiring people, not only your team, but also the people outside of your team, those people that you're serving, to do the right thing, not because they're afraid of getting in trouble, but because they believe in what you're doing. They believe that what you're doing is in concert with their overall purpose for being there. So fast forward now, I'll give you another lesson or another example from my time in Abuja, Nigeria. In Abuja, Nigeria, while I was there, we had two different elections. And Abuja is split up into multiple states. For those of you that don't know that, 27 different states. And we sent election monitors to each of these states with a protective detail to monitor the elections in order to make sure that the process was being done as fairly and equitably as possible. During that time, these conversations that I had back at my first tour about where to shop and what not to do, etc., each of these security details were having these same conversations with their protectees. These protectees were the election monitors that had these American diplomat election monitors that we were launching and putting forth throughout the country in order to support Nigerian fairness in their elections. What I found was the closer that their protective detail could find harmony with their protectees, or the faster they were able to do that, the more synchronicity in the common ground they could reach between themselves, made each of these protective details a little bit easier, smoother, and that cohesiveness between protectee. Once again, I'm at the top of the pyramid, and I have these multiple protection details, and I'm watching how they all work, and I'm learning a little bit about each of theirs. And so what I found out was that synchronicity that was established at the tactical level between each of these security details and their protectees, that was the key to success. So I saw that at a higher level. This is something that I've noticed. Now that I'm of some experienced special agents right here in downtown San Diego and support staff, I've noticed that my interaction with my team, because they're at that mid-level or higher stage of their career, it's cool because I can apply more of my own leadership. The management piece is not as important because I have people that already know what need to be done in terms of the blocks being checked, emails, bills being paid, communications to contractors, the shipment of supplies become the opposite. All these things are on autopilot. all I need to do now is come here, exert leadership, exert my own style, put trust in my people, apply each of these three things that I've learned. And I feel like leadership is something that at this point in my career, as I've evolved in my 19th year with the Diplomatic Security Service, I feel like it's even more important. And if I was purely a manager at this point, all I would worry about is, are these guys doing anything that's going to get me in trouble? Are these guys out screwing around when they shouldn't be? Is this person at his or her desk returning the emails that he or she needs to? I'd be worrying about if my people were right on the right agency website to check the right box for whatever reasons. You know, these are all management things. But because I'm at this point in my career and I can be more of a leader, I can just observe, watch, see that these things are being done. And if someone needs to be reminded, I can do so tactfully. I can do it individually. I don't have to do it as a group, and everybody's a little more happier. Also, my people know that I'm here for them. I don't necessarily need to get promoted out of this. That's not a personal goal of mine. I'm here for them. I'm here to contribute to them in completing their mission here at the San Diego resident office. And I'm also here to help them complete their goals in their personal life in terms of what they want to do after this, when they leave this assignment or even after they retire. So in closing, I will just tell you that there are three main things that I've learned at this point in my career. First one is the importance of selecting the right people so that you can trust them and do good things. I will tell you that being able to evolve means understanding not just what each of your members are doing, not just what the manager or the cybersecurity guy or gal is doing, but also understanding what your customers are doing and what their priorities are. And again, I'll refer you to the example of the multiple attaches at a U.S. embassy. And finally, the difference between management and leadership. I will tell you that management is what you need to keep your job, but leadership is what you need to do, or what you need to demonstrate in order to do good things in your job. So I hope those three items or those 3 points have resonated with each of you. And I think my contact information is on the website, and I welcome your feedback and any discussions that you'd like to have. Thank you.